Hello, this is Randall Root, and this video is about exercise 8.1. In exercise 8.1, your focus is to go through and complete the final tasks of filling up the dimension tables and the fact tables within your SSIS package. This is the SSIS package that we started in the 7th chapter, and we're finishing it up here in the 8th. And of course, the code that you're going to be utilizing is the code inside of the script file that comes with the project. Again, if for some reason you did not finish the exercises in the previous chapters, you can always use mine. The thing is that you'll have to go through and change or set the connections when you first open it. But assuming that things are going well so far to that point, it's just a matter of going through and configuring each of these items. So, for example, in the dim authors task, I would go through and configure the get authors data on the source so that it had the code that we wrote in the previous chapters that included things like casting the columns to a particular data type or concatenation. Most of our transformations are done in the SQL code, so we don't have to do too much here in SSIS, and this proves to be actually faster for processing. Now, one thing I mentioned in the book, and I want to mention here, is make sure that after you've copied and pasted the code from the whatever code file for ETL code file you have, then you want to make sure that when you paste it in here, click on columns. If you don't click on columns, sometimes, occasionally, the XML code behind the scenes that a SSIS package is made from doesn't actually get completed correctly. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen, so always click on columns. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. Then you go through and drag and drop the line. Now remember, I think I mentioned, I'm sure I mentioned in the book because it's kind of a real pain if you don't know this. Let's say that let's say I have a source. So let me grab one. Other sources, OLEDB source. You got it. And I configure it by taking the code. Let's see, where our ETL code, here it is. We're doing something with the authors table. Okay, grab that code, copy it. Change this to command and paste it in. Now, I've configured at this point. But you know, if I hadn't have actually gone through and done that, if I just dragged and dropped it onto the screen, at this point it doesn't actually have any metadata about which columns I'm going to use. So if I go to the advanced editor, I didn't show this in the book, but there's a set of 4 columns here, and one is the output coming out, and there's no output coming out. When we have one that's configured, there's output coming out. This represents the metadata about what is going to be transferred, information about the information being transferred. And in it, you can see things like the data type that's been identified. So it's Unicode wide string, that's what W is for, data type wide string, 100 characters. And you know, that came from our concatenation and our conversion. Same thing here. Anyway, when you have a destination, if you drag and drop the blue line from the source to the destination, at that point in time, there is no metadata being transferred about the columns. And sometimes when you go back and you put in the code, even if you hit columns, the metadata may not get transferred. Let's see if it did. This time it did, but you can't always trust that. What I've learned over the years is that when you have a source and a destination, do not connect the line before you configure the source. If you do, this will sometimes become, well, for all intents and purposes, corrupt. So at that point, you're better off just to go ahead and delete it and then put a new one on there and connect it. And that way you're assured that the metadata being transferred through the line is indeed correct and is being transferred appropriately over the destination. Now in the destination, all you're going to have to do is tell it which table you're going to put the data into. It should be pointed to DW pub sales, not pubs of course, because that's the data warehouse we're putting stuff into. And then the drop-down box will go ahead and point to the dim authors table. For a similar reason as the data source, in order to get the XML codes set correctly, you need to click on mappings, even if you're not going to do anything. If the names are spelled identical, SSIS will figure out that you want to map, or guess that you want to map the data from the column with the same name to the column with the same name. And as such, it will go ahead and provide the little lines for you. If for some reason you've spelt them differently, let's say I put author's full name here instead of authors, I would have to use the drop-down box to pick the column. So for example, let's say that the spelling between those were different. It would show up as ignored. At that point, I would go ahead and use the drop-down box to select the item I want to map. Notice that the line comes back when you do this. Also, you can drag and drop. Anyway, even if you don't do much of anything, you still want to click on mappings. And, oops. That would do it. Now you're configured. At that point in time, you could move on to the next one by using the drop-down box and choosing each one that you want to work with. Of course, the instructions are in the book, but sometimes a video helps. Anyway, I hope you found it helpful.